In the glaring lights of the airport terminal, Samuel felt every eye on him like a judgmental blade, cutting through his confidence until only raw fear remained. Grace's cheeks burned as the attendant's cold pronouncement, "You don't belong here," echoed in her ears, louder than the roar of jet engines. No one rose to defend them. Instead, they watched two black children shrink beneath the weight of casual cruelty. Each whispered taunt and sidelong glance pressed them further into isolation, as if the world itself conspired to push them off course. But in that searing moment of humiliation, a quiet ember of defiance ignited, promising that their pain would not break them. It would become the spark that set a powerful reckoning in motion. What happened next shocked everyone and set off a chain of events no one saw coming. Stay with me. This is a story you need to hear. Before we start the story, comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching from today. And if you find this story impactful, don't forget to subscribe for more. The first light of dawn slipped through the thin curtains of a small apartment on Maple Street, painting the worn wooden floor in soft amber stripes. The air smelled faintly of last night's rain, mingled with the sweet warmth of syrup and batter that hissed gently on the stove. Samuel, tall and careful in his movements, floated between the stove and the chipped formica table, flipping pancakes with quiet precision. Across the room, Grace sat perched on a chair too high for her slight frame, clutching a neat envelope, her dark curls brushing the table's edge. "Smells good," she murmured, voice soft as she watched the pancakes rise and brown. She tapped the envelope's seal lightly with her thumbnail, as if waiting for it ever so patiently to spring open. Samuel paused, spatula in midair, and glanced at his sister with a small, knowing smile. "It's Dad's letter," he said. His voice was calm, steady, exactly what she needed this morning. Grace nodded. Their father, Henry Wallace, was a man of great influence. He ran an airline that flew through skies from Boston to Bangkok, but he had not visited them in years. Instead, he wrote letters, carefully typed and single-spaced, always promising he'd come soon, always sending tickets in crisp white sleeves. Samuel set a hot pancake on a plate and slid it toward his sister. "Eat before we go," he urged. "You'll need your strength." Grace dropped the envelope into her lap and tucked a loose curl behind her ear. The letter's weight pressed against her thigh like a small stone of hope. She lifted her eyes to Samuel. "You think Mom would have liked this?" Her voice cracked on the last word. Her mother, Lydia, had died 2 springs ago, and every day since felt a shade colder. He swallowed. He always swallowed when he felt that same ache, the one that knotted his chest when he remembered Lydia's laughter echoing through these same walls. "She would have loved watching us fly on Daddy's planes," he said. "She would have been so proud." Grace nodded, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. She tore the envelope open with a snap, and out fell 2 boarding passes printed in black ink. One for Samuel Wallace, age 17, and one for Grace Wallace, age 13. Both bound for Seattle at midday. She traced the letters of her name with a fingertip, then tucked the passes into the pocket of her backpack. They finished breakfast in companionable silence, the little kitchen humming with the softness of a stove and the tick of a battered clock. Samuel washed the dishes while Grace folded her favorite blue cardigan, the one she wore every time she needed courage. Outside, the sky brightened to pale blue. Summer was still young, but its promise was already building in the heat that crept into the windowsill. By 8 o'clock, they were stepping onto the sidewalk. The city was rousing itself. Trash trucks rattled by, the scent of fresh coffee trailed from a corner cafe, and distant sirens pulsed under the rumble of early traffic. Samuel hoisted his backpack onto one shoulder, and Grace tugged at the straps of hers, smoothing out a stray ribbon of her hair. "Remember," Samuel said, checking the tickets again, "we're just 2 kids traveling alone. Stay close, answer questions honestly, and keep your IDs ready." Grace nodded firmly. "Got it." But her throat felt tight, and her fingers trembled as she watched Samuel's confident stride. She wanted to be brave, wanted to be big enough to match his calm, but the flutter of nerves made her wish for her mother's gentle hand. A short taxi ride took them to the airport. Glass doors slid open as they approached, and a cool rush of air-conditioned mist greeted them. The terminal floor gleamed under fluorescent lights, and rows of chairs sat like silent sentinels awaiting travelers. Voices rose and fell in a constant murmur, announcements over speakers, rolling suitcases, the click of heels on tile. Samuel led Grace through the entrance, nodding politely to a security guard who barely glanced their way. At the check-in counters, a line stretched out, but it moved swiftly. When their turn came, the attendant, a woman in a crisp uniform with silver wings pinned above her name badge, peeked at their tickets and then at Grace's small face. "Unaccompanied minors," she said, as though reciting from a list, then tapped a key. Samuel caught Grace's hand and squeezed it. "Here you are," he said, pushing the tickets toward the woman. His voice was low but firm. The attendant glanced again, frowned slightly at Grace's age, then handed the tickets back. "Gate 15, she said, voice neutral. "Proceed to security. You'll go through the kid line." Grace exhaled, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Kid line?" Samuel smiled and winked at her. "An express lane for children. It's fast." They moved on. Shoes off at the screening line, jackets on the conveyor belt, laptops pulled from bags. The metal detector beeped once for Samuel, twice for Grace, but both passed without incident. Beyond security, duty-free shops glowed with perfumes and chocolates, and families gathered around departure boards scrolling flight times. Grace clutched Samuel's hand as they searched for SEA 12:05 p.m. on time. When they spotted it, they turned down a corridor lined with windows. Outside, planes of every color stood on the tarmac, engines silent, but always ready. Grace pressed her forehead against the glass, tracing the curve of a jet's wing, the way its silver surface caught the light. She felt small in the vastness of the runway, but somehow also important, like she was part of something much bigger than this terminal. Samuel stood beside her. "You ready?" he asked, gentle. Grace nodded. "Yes." She reached into her backpack, pulled out a small notebook, a gift from her father last Christmas, and flipped to a fresh page. She wrote her name at the top, then beneath it, Seattle. Then she paused, looked up at the sky stretching behind the planes, and let the words settle. "I'm ready." They walked on until a large glass door, marked Gate 15, loomed ahead. A uniformed flight attendant stood there, arms crossed, scanning boarding passes as passengers approached. As Samuel handed his ticket forward, the attendant's eyes flicked up to his face, then down to Grace's. For a heartbeat, her gaze hardened, and Grace felt it, an invisible brush of skepticism that made her hold her breath. But the attendant merely nodded and slid the tickets back. "Boarding begins at 12, she said, voice clipped. "Wait here until then." Samuel offered a polite thank you and led Grace to a pair of seats nearby. They sat side by side, knees almost touching. Grace tucked her notebook away and leaned her head on Samuel's shoulder. Outside the window, a dark storm cloud lingered over the far end of the runway, an ominous gray that threatened to swallow the horizon. But here, inside Gate 15, their world felt suspended between stillness and flight, uncertainty and possibility. Samuel draped an arm around her. "Just 2 more hours," he said. "We've got this." Grace closed her eyes, letting the noises of the terminal fade. The distant rumble of a jet engine, the shuffling feet of travelers, the gentle beep of a charging station. She imagined the freedom of soaring above the clouds, of looking down on cities and rivers, of being carried toward her father, toward the promise of reunion, of answers, of something beyond the steady ache of missing her mother. Somewhere beneath that ache lay excitement, too. A spark that warmed her chest, like the first pancake, had warmed her belly that morning. And as she sat there with Samuel by her side, watching the storm cloud drift away, she felt herself opening to the journey. A journey that would test her courage, reveal hidden truths, and she hoped bring them closer to the home they both longed for. When the announcement finally crackled over the loudspeaker, "Now boarding Seattle Flight 412, Grace's heart thudded. She gripped Samuel's hand, and together they stood. Each step toward the gate felt like a step into the unknown. But with Samuel in front and the sky ahead, she felt ready to face whatever awaited on the other side of these doors. The cabin hummed with the gentle roar of engines and the low murmur of passengers settling into seats. Overhead bins clicked shut in rhythmic succession, and the scent of recycled air mixed with faint traces of coffee that someone must have spilled earlier. Samuel and Grace slipped into seats 22B and 22C, side by side, their knees almost touching. Grace's fingers trembled as she tugged her backpack closer, while Samuel offered a steadying smile. "What do you think Dad would say if he saw us now?" Grace whispered, tracing the stitching on her navy sweater. Samuel glanced at the aisle, then back at her. "He'd remind us we're stronger than any stranger's words," he said softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver cross, Grace's favorite necklace that Henry had sent months ago. He handed it across, and Grace slipped it around her neck, the metal cool against her skin. A flight attendant in a crisp navy blazer, her name tag read Morgan, strode down the aisle, clipboard in hand. Her expression was polite, but unreadable, trained into a mask by years of routine. She paused at their row and tapped the clipboard. "Unaccompanied minors," she said, voice neutral. "I need to see your proof of guardianship." Her eyes flicked to Grace first, then to Samuel, as though measuring their worth. Samuel offered the boarding passes and Grace's consent form from the airline's website. Morgan scanned them, lips pressing into a thin line. "Forms are incomplete," she pronounced. "I'm afraid you two can't stay here." Grace's heart stuttered, but she began, voice small. Morgan raised a hand. "I'm sorry. You need an adult to escort you. Please come with me." She stepped back into the aisle, folding her arms as if preparing for an argument. Samuel stood. "These are valid. The forms said unaccompanied minors are allowed if they're siblings traveling together." Morgan's gaze hardened. "Policy is policy. If the forms aren't correct, I have to remove you from a flight." She tilted her head, her voice suddenly cold and professional. "Follow me." Passengers turned to watch. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, others pretended not to notice. An elderly woman in the next row leaned forward, eyebrows knitting in concern. Grace glanced at Samuel, wide-eyed. "He told me the forms were fine," she whispered. "I know," Samuel murmured. He took Grace's hand. "Just stay calm." But inside him, anger coiled like a spring. They rose and followed Morgan down the aisle. The hum of conversation dimmed as they passed, as though their footsteps muted the cabin. Bodies leaned aside. Eyes flicked away. No one volunteered to help. At the front of the plane, Morgan stopped near the galley. "Please wait here," she said, then turned and ducked behind the curtain. The flap snapped shut. Samuel stood rigid, chest tight. Grace perched on the edge of a jump seat, feet dangling. The curtain trembled as Morgan whispered urgently to a colleague. Samuel couldn't make out the words, but he saw the other attendant's head shake. Then the curtain opened. "I've called security," Morgan announced, voice low but sharp. "They'll escort you off." She offered no apology. The clipboard in her hand gleamed under the cabin lights. Grace's lip quivered. "We haven't done anything wrong." Morgan sighed as though bored. "I'm just enforcing rules." She pressed a finger to the clip of her headset. "Thanks." In the cabin, a child a few rows back stared at them, puzzled. A man reading the newspaper pretended not to look, but his shoulders twitched, betraying his sympathy. But no one rose to challenge Morgan. Samuel's fists clenched. "You can't do this," he said, voice tight. Morgan tilted her chin, the picture of indifferent authority. "I can and I will. You'll have to disembark." Grace began to cry, silent tears streaking down her cheeks. The pressure of dozens of eyes on her felt like a weight. She sank lower, trying to disappear, but only tearing at her sweater instead. Samuel knelt beside her. "It's okay," he whispered, though his heart thudded so loud he feared she'd hear it. "We'll fix this." An ominous chill settled in the cabin, an unspoken question hanging in the recycled air. Why? Why would they, two innocent kids, be singled out? Grace's sobs caught in her throat as she looked up, eyes shining with betrayal. This flight was meant to carry them toward their father, toward answers about their mother's last days, and perhaps even a reconciliation with Henry. Instead, it threatened to mar their reunion with humiliation. Morgan tapped her clipboard again, her patience gone. "Sir, stand up. Ma'am, come with me." She motioned toward the exit door at the front of the plane. Samuel rose, wrapping his arms protectively around Grace's shoulders. He could feel every heartbeat in her chest. "Please," he said, meeting Morgan's eyes, "this isn't right." She didn't flinch. "I have my orders. Now move." As they stepped off the plane, the aisle lights blinked red, warning that the door was opening. Samuel glanced back at the rows of seats, now emptying of their potential witnesses. No one offered a hand. Outside the door, a skyway stretched to the terminal, a bridge that should have led them forward but now dangled like a broken promise. Morgan led them down it, clipboard tapping her thigh with every step. The hatch sealed behind them with a dull thud. Grace buried her face in Samuel's side. Why would she do that? Samuel shook his head. He pulled out his phone. "Let me call Dad." His fingers flew over the screen until he found Henry Wallace's number. He hit the dial. The line rang, then rang again, then clicked into voicemail. Samuel bit his lip. "She's busy," he said, voice hollow. "Let me try Mom's office." He hung up and dialed their mother's old email. No answer. The shortest fuse of dread ignited in his chest. What if no one picked up? What if this humiliation was the start of something far worse? Behind them, footsteps approached. A man in a dark suit, airport security, rounded the corner, badge glinting. He blocked their path. "Children unaccompanied," he said, checking his tablet. "We need to verify guardianship before boarding." His tone was procedural, detached, but his eyes flicked to Grace's tear-streaked face. Samuel swallowed. He glanced at Morgan, who hovered behind the security guard, her arms crossed. She watched him with a look that chilled him more than the airport's air conditioning ever could. "Let us pass," Samuel said. "My father is the CEO of this airline. You can call him if you doubt us." Morgan's lips twitched, an almost smile. "Sure," she said, voice silky. "Call him." Samuel's hand shook as he dialed again. This time he stayed on the line, ear pressed to the phone, watching Morgan's expression. She rubbed her chin as if contemplating something. The security guard tapped his foot. Minutes passed, but no one answered. Grace tugged at Samuel's sleeve. "I can't take this," she whispered. Samuel's mind raced. He remembered the first letter he'd ever received from Henry, how bold the typeface was, how his father ended with "always here for you." And here he was, unreachable. The contradiction stung like salt in a wound. Morgan sighed and tucked her clipboard under her arm. "Look," she said, voice dropping to a near whisper, "you two can't board. But if you want, you can wait in the kids' lounge until your father picks you up. It's just past security." Grace brightened. "A lounge?" "Yes," Morgan said, "with game snacks. You'll be safe." She turned away, as though eager to end the encounter. Samuel's anger flared. Was this kindness or a trap? "No," he said, voice firm. "We're staying together. And we're getting on that plane." Morgan paused, then arched an eyebrow. "Is that a threat?" "No," Samuel said, evenly. "A promise." Morgan's eyes narrowed. She picked up her phone and tapped it twice. Grace gasped. The security guard stiffened. Morgan glanced at them both, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face. "Fine," she said. "You'll board, but don't cause trouble." Samuel felt something shudder through the attendant's mask, perhaps annoyance or something darker. He led Grace back down the skyway, stealing himself. The door slid open, and they stepped onto the plane again. Immediately, the cabin's roar swallowed them. Seats awaited, their whispers washed away in the rush of recycled air. Grace sank into 22C, face pale but determined. Samuel took 22B, chest tight. Morgan stood in the aisle, clipboard held in one hand like a weapon. She scanned their tickets, then looked up. "This flight is monitored," she said quietly. "If I see anything amiss, I'll remove you again." Samuel met her gaze. "Understood." Morgan turned and walked away. Samuel closed his eyes. Grace reached for his hand, and he squeezed, but for all the beauty outside, inside she felt a fracture, an invisible tear in the promise of this journey. Samuel slid his phone from his pocket. He dialed the speaker and held it between them. "Dad," he said, voice steady despite the tremor inside. "It's me, Sam. We're on the plane. They tried to kick us off. I need your help." There was no answer. He hung up, breath catching. Grace leaned against him, silent. Samuel stared at the screen, stunned by the emptiness it represented. The sky curved beyond the glass, vast and indifferent. Somewhere above the clouds, their father's empire spanned continents. But here, trapped in a metallic tube hurtling through the air, they were alone, and an invisible enemy had already struck. Samuel pressed Grace's hand. "We'll find a way," he whispered. But even as he spoke, he felt the first tendrils of doubt. Had Morgan been acting on her own prejudice or carrying out someone else's orders? Were they pawns in a game far bigger than two frightened kids? The engine's roar climbed. The plane shuddered in takeoff. Grace closed her eyes, clutching Samuel's cross. And in the pulse of that moment between earth and sky, their ordinary world shattered, and a new conflict took flight. Samuel sank back into his seat, eyelids heavy from the turbulence that hummed beneath them like a restless sea. Grace sat beside him, fingers curled tightly around the armrest. For a long moment, neither spoke. The cabin lights dimmed to an orange glow as flight attendants began their service, but Morgan did not appear again. Instead, a new attendant, tall, warm-eyed, with a name tag reading Olivia, approached, smiling as she balanced a tray of drinks. "Anything for you too?" she asked kindly. Samuel managed a small smile. "Just water, please." Grace nodded, voice soft. "Thank you." Olivia poured 2 cups of water, careful not to spill. "First time flying alone?" Grace looked down at her lap. "Yes, ma'am." She raised her eyes. "It's scary." Olivia's smile deepened with gentle understanding. "I know it can be, but you're doing great." She lingered, as if wanting to say more, then turned to other passengers. As the cart rolled on, Samuel exhaled. "See, not all of them are," he swallowed, unable to finish. Grace nodded. "She's nice. But why did Morgan treat us like criminals?" Samuel's jaw clenched. "I don't know, but I'll find out." He reached into his pocket and drew out his notebook, flipping it open to a blank page. "We need a plan. If they're watching us," he paused, thinking, maybe it's someone high up, someone who doesn't want us to reach Dad. Grace frowned. "Who would do that? And why?" Samuel tapped the pencil against the paper, mind racing. "I don't know yet, but we have to assume they'll use anything against us, even our father's name." Grace's eyes filled with worry. "They'll lie about us. Say we're imposters." She chewed her lip. "What if Dad doesn't believe us?" Samuel closed the notebook with a snap. "He will." His voice was firm, but inside his confidence wavered. He recalled Henry's last message, "Always reach out. I'll make things right." But right now, his father was unreachable. Grace hugged her knees and stared at the seat back in front of her. "I miss Mom," she whispered. "I wish she were here." Samuel's chest tightened. "Me too." He glanced at the empty seat cushion beside him, imagining Lydia's gentle presence. She would have known exactly what to say. He paused and placed a hand on Grace's shoulder. "But we have each other." Grace nodded, leaning into him. "Promise we'll be okay?" "I promise." He forced a smile. They settled into silence again, broken only by the low murmur of the plane. Grace's eyes drifted to the window, where streaks of cloud drifted fast beneath them. She touched the silver cross around her neck. "Samuel?" He looked up. "Yeah." She hesitated. "Do you think Dad really cares about us? Or was it just words?" Samuel's heart clenched. He had asked himself the same question 1,000 times. "I think he does," he said, finally. "Maybe he's been stuck in something big, work, problems, maybe even someone stopped him from coming. He searched her face. But I know he loves you. And me." Grace nodded, but her eyes remained doubtful. Samuel sighed. Inwardly, he needed more than words. He needed evidence, some sign that their father was on their side, and not trapped in secrets they didn't understand. A voice crackled through the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin our descent in 10 minutes. Please return your seats to the upright position and fasten your seatbelts. Grace stiffened. Down already? Samuel checked the seatbelt light. Yeah, time flew. The flaps above clicked shut. As the plane dipped, Grace gripped Samuel's arm. This feels weird, she said. He squeezed her hand, just like everything else today. He looked around, noticing how passengers busied themselves with screens and magazines, oblivious to them. When the plane finally touched down, they tipped forward in their seats. Samuel steadied Grace as they stood. Inside the terminal, it was still busy. Families reunited, business travelers on the move, airport staff in constant motion. The hallway led to the baggage claim, but before they could move, Morgan appeared again, flanked by two other attendants. "Mr. Wallace," she said, voice low and measured. "Your father called." She held out his phone. "He wants you to wait here. He'll meet you." Samuel's heart skipped. He did. He took the phone, breath-catching. "Thank you," he said, relief and suspicion warring inside him. Morgan stepped back, arms crossed. He said to bring your sister and you to the VIP lounge. Then, voice neutral, "This way." Samuel looked at Grace. Her eyes were wide, part hope, part fear. He tucked the phone into his pocket. "Let's go." They followed Morgan, weaving through the crowd. Samuel's mind raced. Was this real? Or a trap? He remembered her voice, so quick to banish them, now so eager to escort them. Something about the way she held herself, pinpointed and professional, made his skin prickle. Morgan led them to a discreet, door-marked staff and VIP access only. She swiped a card, the lock clicking open. Beyond lay a quiet corridor with plush carpet and walls lined with polished wood. At the end, double doors stood closed. Morgan knocked lightly. The doors opened, revealing a lounge furnished with leather chairs, low tables, and a view of the runway through large windows. Henry Wallace stood by one of those windows, back to them. His tall frame was unmistakable, broad shoulders, silver hair, posture rigid. Samuel's heart pounded. "Dad?" Henry turned slowly. His blue eyes were steely, unreadable. For a moment he said nothing. Then he strode forward, arms opening. "My boys," he said, pulling Samuel into a fierce embrace. "By God, you frighten me." Samuel felt warmth flood through him, but a flicker of something, strained fatigue, glimmered in Henry's eyes. He lowered his arms and glanced at Grace, who stood behind Samuel, clutching her cardigan. "Daddy," Grace whispered, stepping forward. Henry's expression softened as he gathered her into his arms. For a heartbeat, the three of them were a family reunited. But then Henry's lips pressed into a thin line, and he pulled back. "But something happened on your flight," he said, voice low. "Morgan told me you weren't allowed to board without proper forms." Grace swallowed. "We tried, Dad." But her voice cracked. Henry's gaze flickered to Morgan. "Is that true?" Morgan stepped forward, hands clasped. "Sir, the initial forms were incomplete. But after you called, we updated the paperwork and allowed them on." Henry's shoulders stiffened. He nodded curtly. "Thank you." Morgan inclined her head and left the room, closing the doors behind her. The soft click echoed. Henry turned back to his children. He ran a hand through his hair as though wrestling with words. "Why didn't you call me immediately?" Samuel swallowed. "We tried, Dad. Twice." He held out his phone. "But you didn't pick up." Henry took the phone, checked the call log, and his jaw clenched. "My assistant should have informed me. I'm sorry." He set the phone on a side table. "I was in an emergency meeting. The merger, it's almost complete. But that's no excuse." He exhaled. "I didn't realize Morgan would be so inflexible." Grace looked between her brother and father. "Dad, why was she so determined to stop us?" Henry's eyes darkened. "I don't know. Morgan rarely questions orders. I'll have to find out who gave her those instructions." Samuel felt a spark of relief. "You look into it?" Henry nodded. "Yes, as soon as I return to the office." He paused, studying their faces. "But right now, I need to focus. Someone inside this company wants to stop you from reaching me." Grace clutched Samuel's hand. Samuel's mind whirled. Corporate merger anonymous threats, an insider powerful enough to control Morgan's actions. The stakes had just multiplied far beyond a simple flight snafu. Henry leaned forward. I'm going to protect you, but I need your help. I can't do this alone. Samuel's chest tightened with resolve. We're with you, Dad. Grace nodded, lifting her chin. We'll help. Henry's eyes glinted with pride and worry. Good. Then listen carefully, and as he began to outline the hidden dangers lurking within his own company, the three of them sat huddled in the VIP lounge, bound by blood and the urgent need to unmask a traitor in their midst. The flight was over, but the real journey, one of trust, betrayal, and uncovering dark secrets, had only just begun. Samuel watched their father's profile fade on his phone and felt the first real tendril of doubt curl in his chest. The lounge's plush walls, warm lighting, and runway view now felt stifling, as though they were trapped in a gilded cage. Grace squeezed his hand. Dad didn't actually call, Samuel murmured. That wasn't his voice on the line. Grace's eyes widened. But Morgan said. She lied, Samuel said, jaw clenched. She works for someone else. 2 seats away, Morgan reappeared, ostensibly checking the windows. Samuel strained to hear her low conversation with a tall man in a charcoal suit, Mark Davenport, Henry Wallace's CFO. They spoke behind closed doors, but voices carried. And once they believe Henry's on board, we'll control the narrative, Mark said. Tone clipped. The merger depends on their loyalty. I don't like involving the kids, Morgan replied, voice softer but firm. What if he finds out? He won't, Mark promised. You make sure they stay here. If Henry balks, you'll deal with him too. Samuel's heart thundered. The world tilted. Everything they'd been through, being barred from a flight, the phony call, the rushed escort to the VIP lounge, had been orchestrated. Not to protect them, but to manipulate their father and seal a deal that would reshape the entire company and leave their family torn apart. Grace's breath caught. They're using us. Samuel's face hardened. We have to get proof. He pressed a finger to his lips and nodded toward the door behind Mark and Morgan. It stood slightly ajar, the hallway beyond bathed in sterile airport lighting. They slipped from their seats and crept toward the door. Mark turned as Samuel placed an ear against it. He and Morgan spoke in hurried whispers. She still suspects, Mark said. If she alerts Henry, we lose control. Morgan's sigh spat between her teeth. Then I'll delay him. He's vulnerable when he thinks we're keeping you two safe. Samuel felt bile rise in his throat. Grace trembled beside him. This was worse than he'd imagined. Not some random rule follower, but his father's own lieutenant, using his children as pawns. He looked at Grace. Ready? Grace nodded, eyes bright with fear and fury. Together, they pushed the door open an inch and peeked inside. Mark bent over a sleek desk, phone in hand. On the screen glowed a text thread. Mark, they're in place. Morgan's handling them. Henry will sign tomorrow. Elena, excellent. The board will approve. The kids are the key. Samuel recognized the contact name, Elena Hart, Henry's executive assistant, someone he and Grace had met at holiday parties. Trustworthy, kind, betrayal sliced through him. Why would she? Grace whispered. Samuel held up a finger. They stepped back, silently. A moment later, Mark's phone buzzed again. He swiped and scrolled, unaware of his listeners. Everything hinges on tomorrow, he muttered. Once Wallace merges with Night Air, our side profits. And Henry's reputation shatters if anyone learns of this manipulation. Morgan's heels clicked behind them as she finished her call. She passed the door and didn't notice the slight shift in its frame. The siblings melted into the corridor's shadows. Outside, the terminal's hum felt distant. Samuel wrapped an arm around Grace. We need to warn Dad, he said. Grace swallowed hard. But we can't reach him by phone. Samuel nodded. We need physical proof. Screenshots, documents, something he can't ignore. They slipped down the quiet corridor. At the lounge entrance, the double doors lay ajar. Samuel pushed them open, cracking the privacy seal. Inside, the empty lounge glinted under runway lights. No Morgan, no Mark. Their tracks ended here. We split up, Samuel whispered. I'll search Mark's desk. You find Morgan's station. Grace hesitated, then crept in. Samuel darted to the desk where Mark had been. A laptop stood open, screen-locked. He tapped a key. The password prompt blocked him. Frustration flared. He needed to work fast. Grace, meanwhile, approached a small service desk against the wall where Morgan had left her clipboard and phone. She rifled through the drawer and found a single piece of loose paper, folded small, an email printed in fine type. Elena's name scrolled at the top of the page, private for Mark's eyes only. Grace unfolded it. Subject: Operation Skyfall. To Mark Davenport. From Elena Hart. Extract: The children must be controlled. Use Morgan's loyalty. Once Henry signs tomorrow, we'll secure the board's votes by exposing any dissenters, especially those who question using family. If there's a leak, blame it on emotional blackmail. Proceed accordingly. Grace's breath caught. She tucked the paper into her pocket and hurried towards Samuel, who fumbled with the laptop. He jabbed at the keyboard, then spotted a USB port. "Give me a flash drive," he hissed. Grace reached into her backpack and handed him the only drive she had, one with her school project on it. "Use it." Samuel plugged it in and managed to open a hidden folder on the desktop labeled Board Documents. Rows of PDF files listed: merger projections, corporate hostage strategy, board vote manipulation. He clicked one. The report detailed how exploiting the CEO's children would pressure Henry into compliance. "Got it," he breathed, copying the files. The progress bar ticked upward. They froze as footsteps echoed down the corridor. Morgan's voice whispered to someone, "I'll be back in 10. Watch the lounge." Samuel closed the folder and pulled the drive out. He dropped it into his pocket and grabbed Grace. They darted back the way they came, hearts pounding. Behind them, the lounge doors slid shut with a silent hiss. Morgan reappeared, phone in hand, and frowned at the closed doors. Samuel and Grace rounded the corner, nearly colliding with a janitor cart. The children skidded past, hiding behind stacked trolleys. Morgan marched by, scanning the hall. She tapped her headset. "They're gone. Keep looking." Samuel grabbed Grace's hand. "To the gate," he whispered. They fled down the terminal's labyrinthine halls. The airport's bustle resumed. Travelers, trolleys, distant announcements. No one noticed two small figures weaving through crowds. When they reached Gate 15, the scene was familiar and jarring. The boarding area stood empty, chairs now folded. A small kiosk offered coffee. A sign read Seattle Flight 412, all aboard. Samuel spotted the attendant's counter where they'd checked in. He climbed onto the platform and whispered to the new attendant, Olivia, who was wiping down chairs. She gave him a curious look. "We need help," Samuel said urgently. "Is there somewhere we can call our father? We have proof someone is betting against him, using us to force a merger." Olivia's eyes widened. "Oh my goodness. Of course." She pointed past security. "There's a pay phone near the restroom." Samuel nodded, and they ducked under the cordon ropes and sprinted toward the phone. Grace jammed a quarter in the slot and lifted the receiver. "Mr. Wallace?" Grace asked, voice trembling. "We have proof. An email, your assistant, Elena, we found it." Samuel placed the USB drive on the counter, hoping Henry would get it. Grace dialed the office again, fingers shaking. The line rang. Then a voice answered, deep and tired. "Who is this?" It wasn't Henry's voice. Something was off. "Dad?" Samuel cried. "It's us. We're in the airport. We have evidence. Elena is betraying you. Mark is behind it. You have to come." The line clicked dead. Grace sank onto the floor, phone slipping from her hand. Samuel knelt beside her, heart pounding. The gate area glowed with the soft hum of fluorescent lights. "What now?" Grace whispered, tears shining. Samuel pressed a hand to her back. "We get you home," he said, voice firm. "We won't let them use us. We'll make Dad listen." He stood and offered a hand. "Let's go find Olivia." Grace took it. Together they rose. At that moment, the intercom crackled. Final boarding call for Seattle flight, no longer mere children seeking a reunion. They had become guardians of the truth, racing against time and corporate treachery to save not just their family, but the integrity of everything their father had built. Samuel led Grace away from the payphone, his heart pounding so hard he thought the whole terminal might hear. Olivia, the kind attendant, rounded the corner with quick steps. "Are you two all right?" she asked, concerned about creasing her brow. Samuel swallowed. "We've found evidence. Elena and Mark are plotting to force Dad to sign the merger by using us. We have a USB drive with their documents. We need someone to help us stop flight 412 before it leaves." Olivia's pale face hardened. "Good heavens. Come with me." She took Samuel's arm and steered them toward a back hallway. "I know a security officer who will listen. He's level-headed." Grace clung to Samuel's hand, eyes wide. "Are we safe?" Samuel offered a reassuring smile, though his own legs felt unsteady. "We'll be safe, Grace. We just need to expose the truth." They followed Olivia into a narrow corridor and down a service elevator that rode with a low hum. When the doors opened, a small office lay before them. Plain walls, a desk with a laptop, and a single uniformed officer studying a monitor. The officer looked up, surprised at the sudden trio. "Captain Singh," Olivia said, voice urgent. "These children have urgent evidence of a corporate crime." The officer stood, tall and grave. "Show me." He gestured to the chair. Samuel produced the USB drive and placed it on the desk. Grace, cheeks pale, took a deep breath and told him what they had uncovered: the threats, the manipulated flight, the secret emails from Elena. Captain Singh listened without interrupting, eyes fixed on their faces. When Grace finished, Samuel added, "If Flight 412 departs, they'll silence us, and Dad will never see the proof." Captain Singh opened his laptop and plugged in the drive. Files appeared. Operation Skyfall, board vote manipulation, color-coded charts showing how controlling Henry's children would intimidate the board. The captain's brow furrowed as he read. "This is serious," he said quietly. "I'll need clearance to detain the flight." He picked up a phone and spoke into it in low tones. After a moment, he hung up. "We're on hold. The airline's legal team is arguing jurisdiction. It may be minutes before we can act." Samuel's chest tightened. "Then we have to delay the flight ourselves." Olivia touched his arm. "Wait here. I'll see what I can do with the gate staff." She slipped out, leaving Samuel, Grace, and Captain Singh alone. Grace leaned against Samuel's shoulder. "I'm scared," she whispered. Samuel hugged her. "I know." He closed his eyes for a moment, fighting the tremor in his voice. "But we're doing the right thing." Captain Singh cleared his throat. "You two should go back to the gate. I'll try to stall the departure. They can't leave until I have confirmation." He stood and offered a hand. "Stay close." They hurried back through the service hall and emerged near gate 15. Olivia was there, speaking firmly with two gate agents. Olivia spotted them and waved. She led them to the side, beyond the ropes. "Good news," she whispered. "Captain Singh has paused the flight. They can't close the doors yet." Grace exhaled, relief mingling with panic. "But for how long?" Olivia glanced at the departure board. "Delayed, indefinite." She tapped her clipboard. "Right now, as long as he needs." Samuel nodded. "We need to tell Dad before they override him. But we can't call him." Olivia frowned. "Is there another way?" Samuel thought of the terminal's public address system. If he could get to the booth, he might broadcast a message, brief, factual, and expose the plot to every passenger and crew. But the intercom booth was locked behind a staff-only door. Grace bit her lip. "Could we break in?" Samuel's stomach tightened at the suggestion. "We'd be trespassing. But maybe desperate times call for desperate measures." Olivia's eyes widened. "I could distract the staff. If you're quick, you could get in, make the announcement, and get out before anyone notices." Samuel hesitated. "It's risky." He looked at Grace, whose small face was pale but resolute. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Grace squared her shoulders. "If it stops them from using us and hurting Dad, yes." Samuel swallowed. "All right." He turned to Olivia. "Can you stall them for just 5 minutes?" Olivia nodded. "Consider it done." She strode to the gate desk and began questioning flight manifests. Gate agents glanced nervously, but she held their attention. Samuel crouched beside Grace. "Here's the plan," he whispered. "When Olivia catches their eye, we run to the staff door, pick the lock. This." He pulled a paper clip from his pocket. "It may work. I watched it once when Dad's assistant locked herself out of his office." Grace nodded. "Okay." Olivia caught his gaze and pressed a finger to her lips. She pointed at one of the agents, who was distracted by her questions. Samuel slipped forward, Grace at his heels. They reached the door marked PA control room, staff only. The lock was simple. Samuel bent the clip and worked it for a moment before the latch clicked. Grace's breath caught. Samuel eased the door open. Inside, the room was small but cluttered with amplifiers, microphones, and a panel of buttons labeled Terminal PA, Gate A, Gate B, and so on. A headset lay on a hook. "We have to be fast," Samuel whispered. He lifted the headset and pressed his ear to it. Faint chatter drifted from the plane cabin. He reached for the microphone. "Good afternoon," he began, voice wavering at first. "This is an urgent announcement regarding Flight 412, bound for Seattle. We have reason to believe this flight is being used as part of a corporate conspiracy to manipulate the CEO of this airline by endangering his children. I implore you to remain seated and await further instructions. Security has been notified and will arrive shortly. Please do not board." His voice shook, but he pressed on louder. "All remaining passengers for Flight 412, please stay behind the yellow line and do not proceed to board. This is not a drill. I repeat, do not board." Grace glanced at him, eyes shining. "That's enough." Samuel hesitated, then clicked off the microphone. "I hope so." He put the headset back and turned to leave. But as he opened the door, a strong hand gripped his shoulder. He whirled around to see Morgan, voice low but furious. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. Samuel stammered. I'm just..." Morgan's grip tightened. "You're interfering with flight operations. That's punishable." Grace stepped forward. "You're the one punishing us. We're trying to save our dad." Morgan's eyes flickered, as though surprised by Grace's fierceness. "Your father asked me to protect you. You've jeopardized that." Samuel shook off Morgan's hand. "He never asked you to lie and trap us." Morgan's face hardened. Behind her, another attendant appeared, and together they herded Samuel and Grace from the room. Morgan jabbed a finger at the panel. "You'll stay right here until authorities arrive." Grace's lip quivered. "But this is the only way to warn everyone." Morgan's eyes softened for a second. "Your children. You don't know what you're doing." She turned to the attendant. "Notify security. They can escort them to a holding area." As the attendant sealed the door behind them and guided them toward the nearest service elevator, Samuel's mind raced. Their bold move had exposed the plot to passengers, yes, but it also put them squarely in Morgan's control. Still, he held tight to Grace's hand. "We've made them listen," he whispered. "That's what matters." Grace met his eyes, fierce and trembling. "We're in this together." Samuel nodded. Together. The elevator doors slid shut, and they descended into the unknown. The echo of his announcement crackled in his ears, mingling with the distant roar of flight engines. They had crossed a line, no turning back now. Their choices would shape not only their fate, but the future of their family's legacy. And as the elevator's lights flickered, Samuel steeled himself for whatever challenge lay ahead, knowing that their courage had lit a spark too bright to be easily extinguished. The wide metal doors slid open with a hiss, and Samuel and Grace stepped into a bright, sterile corridor lined with glass observation windows. Their hearts pounded in unison as Captain Singh flanked them, his uniform crisp, authority radiating from every movement. Behind him came two stern security officers, rifles slung at their sides, clear proof that what they carried was serious. A few yards away, Morgan stood with a clipboard, arms folded, eyes hard as steel. Samuel swallowed, watching Grace's small hand tremble in his. He gave her a quick, reassuring squeeze. "We know the truth now, Grace," he whispered. "We have to stand by it." Grace nodded, shoulders squared. Together. His tie was loosened, jacket draped over his chair, his posture tired, but his eyes sharp, riveted on the scene unfolding beyond the glass. Morgan blocked the door as they approached. She glanced at Henry, then back at the children. They made this decision themselves. "Sir," she reported crisply. Henry rose, white hair catching the corridor light. "Bring them in." His voice was both calm and fierce. Morgan stepped aside. Captain Singh ushered Samuel and Grace into the room. The security officers flanked them, forming an unspoken barrier between the children and the conspirators. Olivia hovered at the back, her kindness a small island in the room's tension. Samuel took a deep breath and advanced to the center of the table. Grace followed, chin lifted. Henry stood opposite them, concern etched into every line of his face. "Dad," Samuel began, voice strong, "we uncovered emails, Operation Skyfall, showing that Mark and Elena planned to use us to force you into the merger." He met Mark's cold gaze. "We have the documents." He lifted the USB drive for all to see. Elena's face blanched, Mark's jaw clenched. Henry's expression sharpened with a mix of pride in his son and fury at his lieutenants. "Is this true?" Henry asked, voice low and careful. Elena swallowed, voice quivering. I followed Mr. Davenport's orders. It was meant to protect the company." "Protect the company?" Henry's laugh was bitter. "By betraying your own CEO's children? By colluding to fabricate a guardian crisis and manipulate me with my own flesh and blood?" He turned to Mark. "Explain yourself." Mark strode forward, fists clenched. "Henry, the board was divided. Our stock was plummeting, competitors smelled blood. I did what I had to do to secure the merger." "To secure the merger at any cost," Henry interrupted, a painful disappointment in his voice. "Even if that cost is our ethics, our honesty, our family integrity." He turned to Samuel and Grace. "You, too, did the right thing by bringing this forward. I am sorry I wasn't there for you." Grace pressed her hand to her heart. "We only wanted the truth, and to come home to you." Henry closed his eyes, inhaling. When he opened them, they burned with resolve. "Captain Singh, detain Mr. Davenport and Ms. Hart. They will be held for questioning by the FBI. Ms. Morgan, you assisted them." Morgan's eyes widened as the implication hit her. She glanced at Olivia, who offered a faint, sympathetic nod. Then Morgan bowed her head. "I'm sorry, sir. I was following orders." Henry's gaze softened. "I know you did, but you endangered my children. I can't let that stand." He glanced at his daughter. "Grace, are you all right?" Grace nodded. "Yes, Daddy." Henry turned back. "Morgan, you are free to go. Thank you for protecting my children, even if you were misled." Morgan exhaled, relief mingling with shame. She stepped back, expression unreadable as she left the room. Captain Singh signaled, and the security officers moved in quietly, placing handcuffs on Mark and Elena. As they were let out, Elena's eyes filled with remorse. Mark's face remained rigid, mouth set in a cold line. Henry crossed to his son and daughter, pulling them both into a fierce embrace. Samuel's arms wrapped around his father, and Grace buried her face in his chest. For a long moment, they held each other, the clatter of cuffs and the distant murmur of agents dissolving into nothing. When Henry finally drew back, he brushed a stray curl from Grace's face. "I promise you both, I will make this right. I will rebuild this company on a foundation of trust and integrity, no more secrets." Samuel met his father's eyes. "We believe you." Grace nodded vigorously. "And will help." Henry's lips curved in a tired but genuine smile. "You already have." Later that evening, the airport was hushed as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the runway in fiery streaks of orange and purple. In a quiet family lounge, no longer the one manipulated by conspirators but a genuine refuge, Henry, Samuel, and Grace sat side by side. Olivia brought them hot chocolate and warm cookies, and Captain Singh joined them with a small smile, having wrapped up his duties for the day. Grace traced the rim of her cup with a fingertip. "Dad, what will happen to them?" Henry sighed. They'll face the consequences of their actions, legal inquiries, possibly prison time. But I want them to understand why they did it and why it was wrong. He paused, eyes reflecting the runway's glow. It's not just about punishment. It's about learning to choose integrity over greed. Samuel nodded. We never wanted anyone to get hurt. We just wanted our father back. Henry reached over and ruffled Samuel's hair. I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. He turned to Grace, brushing a loose curl from her forehead. And you have me, always. Grace smiled, genuine and relieved. I'm glad. They sat in comfortable silence as a final flight taxied past the window. Grace leaned against Samuel, and he wrapped an arm around her. Henry watched them with a soft, proud gaze. After a moment, Henry stood. Come on, kids, let's get you home. He extended both hands, and they took them without hesitation. Together, they walked toward the exit, leaving the corporate battlefield behind. Weeks later, in the bustling headquarters of Wallace Airlines, a new board meeting convened. Henry presided at the head, Samuel and Grace guests of honor at his side. Olivia served as his executive liaison, trusted, compassionate, and unwaveringly loyal. Captain Singh was invited as a special advisor on security reforms. Mark Davenport and Elena Hart were absent. Their chairs remained empty, a silent reminder of the price of betrayal. Around the table, senior executives and board members sat quietly, the weight of recent events lingering in the air. Henry began, voice steady, in the wake of the attempted manipulation of this company and my own family, we must reaffirm our commitment to transparency, integrity, and the well-being of every member of our Wallace Airlines family. He gestured to Samuel and Grace, and to my children, who reminded me of the importance of those principles. Samuel felt his cheeks flush under the sincere applause. Grace squeezed his hand, her pride shining brightly. Henry continued, from this day forward, we implement a new code of ethics, comprehensive security measures, and channels for every employee to report wrongdoing without fear. He paused to let it sink in. We will rebuild trust within these walls with our customers and throughout every community we serve. The board erupted in supportive voices. Resolutions passed unanimously. When the meeting adjourned, Henry hugged Samuel and Grace once more in front of the assembled executives. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner in their longtime home, walls now hung with photos of happier times, Mom's laughter immortalized in every frame. Samuel and Grace sat across from their father at a round oak table. He carved roast chicken, the aroma mingling with the soft glow of candlelight. Grace looked up. Dad, do you think our story will help others? Henry met her gaze, pride and tenderness in his eyes. I believe it already has. People are talking about how two brave kids stood up for what was right. That will inspire change. Samuel smiled. We did it together. Henry nodded. Together. And that's the greatest lesson of all. Family trust and courage can overcome even the darkest conspiracies. Grace lifted her glass of apple cider. To my family, Samuel and Henry echoed, to family. They clinked their glasses, the sound bright and hopeful. In that warm kitchen, with laughter echoing and Mom's portrait smiling down, they knew their world had shifted, scarred by betrayal but healed by unity. The airline soared on, built anew upon the values the Wallace children had protected. And in their hearts, Samuel and Grace carried the knowledge that bravery and love, when united, could change the course of any destiny. The dawn light slanted through the living room window, painting soft gold stripes across the hardwood floor where Samuel and Grace sat on opposite ends of the worn rug. Their father, Henry, moved quietly in the kitchen, preparing breakfast with a calm focus they had not known he possessed before the crisis. The air smelled of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon, ordinary comforts that felt miraculous after the storm they had weathered together. Samuel watched his father pour 3 cups of coffee, black for Henry, a dash of cream for Grace, and a small cup of hot chocolate that Morgan had insisted he learn to make. He'd insisted it himself when she came to visit last week, apologizing for the part she'd played, and offering her friendship. Now she worked in a new role, one that valued. When she caught Samuel's eye, she smiled, and he remembered the trembling girl who had clung to his side on Flight 412, terrified by Morgan's icy glare. Now she laughed freely at a joke Henry made, her face glowing. Henry set a plate of pancakes before them and joined them at the table. He looked more relaxed than Samuel had ever seen him. Suit jacket replaced by a simple sweater, tie hung over a chair like a piece of armor laid down after battle. He reached for Samuel's hand. "How are my heroes this morning?" he asked, voice warm. Grace piped up first. "We're good. But why did you invite us down here? School starts soon." Henry chuckled. "I thought we'd practice our new morning routine before classes begin. Breakfast together, talk about our day, keep the lines open." He had a notebook in front of him, one for family meetings where everyone could share news or concerns. It was a tradition their mother, Lydia, had started. Samuel's throat tightened at the memory, but he forced a smile. Henry continued, "But before we dig in, I want you both to know how proud I am. You stood up for what was right, even when it meant risking everything." His gaze shifted between them. "I've made changes at the airline, new ethics committees, transparent reporting channels, and I've asked Captain Singh to lead training on respect and safety for all passengers, no exceptions." Samuel nodded, swallowing. "I'm glad, Dad. I hope no one else has to go through what we did." "Me too," Henry said softly. "But if they do, they'll have the tools to speak up and people who will listen." He took a sip of coffee. "And I want to thank you both for teaching me that sometimes I wasn't listening enough." Grace set down her orange juice. "We know you love us," she said, voice small but certain. "We just needed proof." Henry reached across and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Proof in action," he said. "And I'm sorry I let boardroom politics blind me to what mattered most." Samuel felt a swell of emotion. It had been weeks since that day in the airport lounge, when Henry first embraced them amid the tension of handcuffs and betrayal. Weeks since the board meeting where empty chairs marked the absence of Mark and Elena. Weeks since the hush of files landing on Captain Singh's desk and the murmur of agents ushering conspirators away. Yet the memory felt as vivid as yesterday. After breakfast, they walked together to the city park where Lydia's favorite cherry tree bloomed in fiery pink. Samuel and Grace carried bouquets of wildflowers, daisies, lupins, and a single white rose for remembrance. The petals fluttered in the gentle breeze, and sunlight filtered through new green leaves. It was a sacred place where their mother had taught them to dream, to question, to stand tall in the face of injustice. Henry knelt by the tree's trunk and placed the rose at its base. "Mom," he whispered, "thank you for lighting our path." He rose and gestured for the children to join him in a quiet moment of reflection. Samuel closed his eyes and breathed in the sweet scent of blossoms. He thought of the tangled moral thread they had tugged, breaking into control rooms, broadcasting over intercoms, sneaking behind closed doors. At every step, they had bent the rules they were sworn to obey. But they had saved more than themselves. They had saved a company, a future, a legacy built on trust. Grace opened her eyes and laid a hand on the tree's bark. "I feel like we did something good, even if we did some bad things," she said, voice wavering between pride and remorse. Samuel sat beside her. "I know. I keep thinking about it." He gazed at his father, who stood with his head bowed, silent tears glistening in his eyes. "Dad," Samuel said, voice steady, "were we right to break in? To hack Dad's assistant's email? To use the PA system? I feel proud but guilty too." Henry rose and gathered them both into his arms. "You did what you had to do when no one else would," he said. "You protected each other and exposed a betrayal no one saw coming. And you learned that sometimes the path to truth is messy. You're young, and you showed courage and compassion. Those choices, while painful, helped us find a better way forward." Grace leaned into the embrace. "I just wish we didn't have to do it." Henry kissed the top of her head. "None of us do. But when the stakes are high, when innocent people are at risk, you forgive yourself for the wrongs you committed in the name of the right." Samuel considered this, then nodded. The moral weight he carried felt lighter, tempered by understanding. He realized that life wasn't a series of clear choices between black and white. It was a tapestry of grays, where love and duty sometimes required sacrifices. They stayed by the cherry tree until the sun climbed high, laughter drifting with the petals and the distant murmur of children playing. Later that evening, back home, they shared a quiet dinner of spaghetti, Lydia's recipe reserved for special nights, under the soft glow of lamps. The table was set for three, but it felt full, with memories, reconciled hearts, and promises of better days. After clearing the dishes, Samuel and Grace retreated to the den, where a photo of their mother smiled down from mantel. They sat on either side of the fireplace, letting the warmth chase away the last of their doubts. Grace spoke first. "Do you think Mom would be proud of us?" Samuel leaned forward, tracing her face in the flickering light. "More proud than anyone," he said. "She always taught us to do what's right, even when it's hard." Grace nodded thoughtfully. "And to stand up for each other." "Yes," Samuel agreed. He hesitated, then added, "I also think she'd remind us that people can change, like Morgan did." He gave a small smile. "And even Mark and Elena might learn something from all this someday." Grace took his hand. "I hope so." Samuel thought about the boardroom chairs left empty. He picturized Mark in an interview room, Elena confessing tearfully, Henry listening with measured resolve. He hoped their father's mercy and the clear path he was forging would guide them to better choices. He rose and grabbed a pad of paper from a nearby desk. He began to write. "Today, I learned that truth is not always neat. Sometimes you have to push past fear, break a rule, or stand alone to protect what matters. But you must also carry the weight of your actions with grace, learn from them, and use that knowledge to build something better." Grace watched him write, then smiled and fetched her own notebook. She scribbled her reflections in looping script. Bravery means speaking up even when you're scared. It means trusting your heart and your family. And it means forgiving yourself for the messy parts. They shared their journal entries over mugs of cocoa. The words felt precious, a record of growth. In that simple ritual, they sealed their experiences, both the dark moments and the breakthroughs, into lessons they would carry forward. As the night deepened, they climbed the stairs to bed. Samuel paused at Grace's door, placing a hand on the doorknob. He looked at the framed boarding passes still pinned on her wall, a reminder of fear, of hope, of the moment their world spun off its axis. He smiled and turned them around so the backs faced out. The empty sides would hold new memories, family breakfasts, picnic days, honest conversations. "Good night," he whispered. Grace yawned and nestled under her covers. "Good night, Sammy," she murmured. He tucked the sheet around her and left the room quietly. Outside, his breath caught in the cool night air of the hallway. He thought of his mother's voice, of Henry's proud eyes, of Grace's fierce love. He understood at last that the moral of their journey was not only about righting a wrong, but about carrying forward the lessons they had learned. Integrity, courage, and compassion woven together into the new fabric of their lives. In the silence before sleep, Samuel realized that endings were just beginnings in disguise. Their battle had ended, but their story of family, truth, and the sometimes painful pursuit of justice would continue, written in every choice they made from that day on. And with that thought nestled in his heart, he closed his eyes, ready for whatever the morning in life would bring. If you found this story powerful, make sure to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Your support helps us bring more important stories to light.